Hello, welcome back to our discussion of CSS selectors. Today we'll be looking at the HTML file where this primarily that the CSS selector is applied to. So we begin with our body here, and remember that we had a CSS selector that selected for the body and selected the Arial or Helvetica font depending on the system you're on, and there we see that it's an inherited property, recall, so that that font is inherited all the way down until this tag, and we'll see this paragraph in a moment. It's down below here, how this calls out actually Times New Roman. Now notice that the markup of the HTML doesn't have to do anything special. That was called out by its tag name, this particular element. So you don't see any markup here that especially says, I need this. So the next element of interest here is this paragraph here. We have a span here, and the note here, if border was inherited, the span would create a border here. As we discussed last time, the border is not an inherited style, or not an inherited rule, because it would create borders everywhere. It would create borders and boxes everywhere in the containment. So in the next span we do have applies a class called inherit border. And inherit border has a rule that says the border style is inherited. So remember, the class selector begins with a period, and then you apply the class here through this attribute here, and that's why we see a border here. So you can overwrite the inherited behavior, either turn it off or turn it on selectively throughout your elements, and here we override it to inherit the border. The next element of interest is this line 44 with the ID use ridge. So this is an ID attribute, so it should only appear once and one time only, this particular ID setting use ridge right here, and you can see the ridge border here, and it was called out here in the CSS file by this pound sign, which indicates that it's an ID selector, and we use ridge. And then the font family is Times New Roman sans serif. So this ID does two things. It changes the border style of the paragraph, but it also changes the font family to Times New Roman, Times, and then serif as the font family rules fallback. This is, again, what you typically see with headings being sans serif and body text being serif font. And I think if you look at this probably looks more natural to you, even if you didn't know that rule specifically. Almost all printed material you've seen throughout your life follows that rule. So our next paragraph here, defined on line 51, I just wanted to show once again that you can call out styles not through general rules, but specifically for on the fly through an attribute. It's a rule set, text align center, display block. So that's why this famous bicycle rider, Dwight D. Eisenhower, is centered within the paragraph. And here we see the image tag source that has this link to an external link. I don't think I've shown that in the HTML part of our course yet. So here's a completely validated, this is a complete path to this external element here. So I'm pulling it directly from that website. So that's a request to another site. Similarly down here, this is another famous bicycle rider, which appears like this because there's no overriding style applied. Here I have an external link to this picture. And then another attribute I'd like to point out here is the height and the width here. So if you need to shrink down an image to make it fit in your location, then you can either specify either the height or the width. And let's say in this case the height is 500 EM. We'll discuss the EM unit later. But if I delete that and save the file, then the resulting image is the original size of the image, which is quite big and too big for our page. So I'll put that back and save it again. So specify either the height or the width attribute in your HTML, then the image will shrink to that height or width, but it shrinks proportionally. So you don't want to specify both dimensions because if you specify both dimensions, pardon me, you'll be responsible for keeping the image in proportion. If you specify only one dimension, then the browser will do the math and keep the image in proportion. So the final element on this page we want to look at, this anchor tag here with the link to, yes, this anchor tag here with the link to, hypertext link to the article where this came from. This target bicycle, this target equals underscore blank, means that this link goes to a new tab to open up. If without this attribute, then this link will open up in place, and then you go back to the original source. So that's good to know. However they landed on it. Let's see what happens when I remove that attribute and now click on the link. I think it still gets big. And it opens in place, and then I hit the back button to go back here. So my attribute equals big is, remember, the attribute that we used over here. Another interesting part of this that I wanted to point out is that my attribute is not a standard HTML attribute for an element. So you can make up your own elements and link to them with CSS and HTML. HTML is very flexible in this. So you can make up your own tags and you can make up your own attributes, and HTML will, on the browser, won't have any specific thing to do with them, but you can use them to link with CSS and JavaScript to the elements in your page. Okay, we'll return with a review of what we've learned.